Welcome to Season 3 of The Trail Chasers, a beginner's guide to trail running, your ultimate resource to kickstart your journey into the wonderful world of trail running. Whether you're taking your first steps into the mountain or looking to refine your trail skills, this podcast is here to guide you every step of the way. In this series, we'll break down everything you need to know, from finding your first trail running group to gearing up for your first race, and even mastering longer technical trails. Each week, I'll be joined by experts and experienced runners, as well as coaches, to share tips, tricks, and real-world advice to make your trail running experience safe, fun, and fulfilling. So lace up those trail shoes and let's dive into the world of trail running together.
This is a new experience for me. There's no guest. I am all alone. I thought maybe it's a good idea to take it back to the beginning and explain why I wanted to do this podcast. I think if we're talking about the podcast medium, there's an interesting story in that 15 years ago, I was at university and something drew me to the radio, the university radio. And I immediately found that was the most incredible thing. And it was such a passion of mine. And there was nothing better. I loved going into that studio. I loved recording. I did the sports. I did a breakfast show. And there was something inside of me that really, that my fire was lit by that. Obviously, if you can take your mind back 15 years, there was no podcasting. There wasn't even social media. So that at that stage, it was cool. You love being on the radio. Your options are basically to become a radio DJ. And in order to do that, you're going to have to compete with thousands of people. And you're going to have to do a lot of graveyard shifts before you get anywhere near like prime time radio. At that stage, I was like, I am passionate about it, but it's not something, A, that I wanted to struggle through, and B, it wasn't something that I thought I could make a living out of. Especially you're in varsity, your parents are still paying for you, and you're about to graduate. I quickly gave up on that idea, but I also still had absolutely no clue what I wanted to do with my life. And there was obviously this new thing called social media, and I really loved the art of communicating, and I thought this could be an alternative place for me to get into. And again, you have to go back 15 years. Facebook was just starting. There was no other kind of social media platforms. So we were all writing the rules as we were going along. I like the saying, we were building the airplane as we were flying it. There were no experts in the space, and I could come into that space and really own it. And then fast forward 15 years, I've felt that I've been stuck in that space and stuck in the social media space because I was good at it, because it felt comfortable, because I didn't really know anything else. But I was really unhappy, and I really didn't find passion and I didn't find joy in what I was doing. And I see a lot of people are really passionate about the social media space. And the conflict came when I saw that, and I saw people who lived, breathed, ate social media. And I was in the space and I knew what to do and I knew how to do it, but I just was not passionate about it. And so I was considering what else can I do? What's next? What else in this kind of space might be a possible career path? And I thought, I've tried this radio thing before. I did enjoy it. Casting is extremely trendy at the moment. And I thought maybe I could try that. I've always enjoyed public speaking. I've always been called on to make speeches off the cuff. I find that I'm really great at talking in public, talking to people with very little preparation. And so I thought this podcasting thing, I have no clue what it entails, but I really enjoy the art of communicating and telling people stories. For probably the last year, I've been thinking, okay, let's give this podcasting thing a go. It seems like something I would enjoy, but they say in podcasting, and I didn't really know it at that stage, you've got to have your first 100 episodes set out before you start a podcast, in that you've really got to be passionate about your subject matter. I knew that I wanted to get into the space. I knew that there was going to be quite a sharp learning curve. So it needed to be a subject that I was passionate about and I could easily get into the space. And as I've gotten more into trail running, that kind of seemed the logical kind of step. in what is the one thing that I'm extremely passionate about and I could talk for hours about. And that thing is trail running. And I think in order to understand the subject matter, we probably have to go back a little bit. In school, I did sport, but I was never really good at it. It was like just a thing you did. I didn't really get any joy from it. And after school, like that whole varsity and life just got so busy. And again, like there wasn't something that I was passionate about in the fitness space that really drew me to that. And for a long time, I was very sedentary. I did try diets and I did understand the concept of losing weight and wanting to be in shape or at least not be overweight. But I think for a long time, it was like the only way to do that is to diet, because I just really didn't enjoy exercise, had this kind of negative block towards it based on the experiences growing up. And my wife is also in the fitness space. She's also a fitness influencer. And she did find joy in the fitness space. She loved going to gym and still does. She loved like everything to do with kind of the fitness space and the bodybuilding space. And it really was a passion of hers. It still is. And I was dragged along unwittingly in that process. What happened was in 2017, which was 7 years ago, a fitness couple, he's from Durban, his name is Dan Vessels, and she's from Canada, her name's Andrea Smith, or now Vessels. They moved to Cape Town, and my wife was absolutely obsessed with them because they'd both competed in bodybuilding shows, and they were like celebrities in that world. And we started just meeting up with them, and obviously they were new to Cape Town, and quickly we developed quite an amazing friendship. And through that process, the idea of gym and fitness suddenly being something that, hey, maybe if this couple and my wife are having so much fun in that space, maybe it is something I can enjoy and I can get into. And I think it really helped that Dan, I really clicked with him. We formed quite a fast friendship. And I think that really helped ease me into the gym process, where I was like, great, I'm happy for you to be my trainer, but we're going to make this a fun thing. We're going to make this a bit of a social thing. And that's how it started, was that I basically was paying him to be my friend and paying him to get me into the gym. And so it became a thing of, I started looking forward to going to the gym because he's such an outgoing person, and he was Mr. Personality and Mr. Gym. So every kind of session with him was fun and lively and vibrant. And it really changed my mindset of gym and fitness as this kind of like task that you push through just because you want to look good or just because you want to lose weight, into something that was really not only fun, but something that I could see myself developing in. I think another problem that I've had for a lot of my life is that I haven't really found something which I'm passionate enough about, but also something which I can see the development and see a path in that kind of area. So for the first time, I was like, wait a minute, like this kind of fitness gym thing, it's incredibly fun. We're having lots of fun in the gym, but I can also develop my body and start picking up weights, start doing the exercises, start at a certain point, and month on month measure my gains and my improvements in that area. So there was that kind of dual kind of fun element, but also that kind of serious, for the first time, self-development element to it, that I was like, okay, let's see what we can do here. Let's see, I'm having fun, I'm enjoying the gym atmosphere, but let's actually take this quite seriously. And I think for 2 and a bit years, going to 3 years, I was religious about my gym. And I would go twice a week, every week, and I picked up quite a bit of muscle in those 2 years. And I was feeling strong. I was feeling comfortable in the gym. I was enjoying the kind of sessions, and it was really a space that I enjoyed being in. And obviously the kind of recognition that came with that self-development, that I went from A to B, but also that like I could now lift heavier weights. I could do longer sessions. I could push my body for those sessions. And it was an amazing experience, and I absolutely loved it. But the other side of it is I put on a huge amount of weight. At that time as well, I had started a food blog in 2016. And as you can imagine, with a food blog, I was eating out 4 or 5 times a week, going to restaurants to review them. Pre-COVID, the food industry in Cape Town, there were events 2, 3, 4 times a week. So the flip side of that was I was like, oh, I'm building muscle, so I can eat whatever I like because I need the energy, and it's not such a problem because I am putting on weight. I very much, for those kind of 2 years, I didn't care about my diet. I ate terribly, and I picked up the weight, and it was obviously a lot of muscle, but I was eating badly. There was drinking involved with it as well. So looking at it in hindsight, like, it really wasn't a healthy lifestyle. I didn't really care about balance. My only goal was to lift heavy weights and basically build up my strength. And I justified the bad eating with the fact that it enabled me to train harder. It enabled me to build muscle. So I was fine with it. I was okay with like not eating proper meals. And because I was so involved in the idea of building muscle, I was completely blindsided to the health situation that was developing. I was strong and I could lift weight, but I was extremely unhealthy. And not only in terms of eating, there was no healthy habits, there was no routine, there was no balance. It was singular focused. And I guess that's something that I've also struggled with, is that once I find this thing I'm passionate about, it's become such a singular focus, often to the detriment of other things in my life. In 2019, I was finding that I picked up probably like close to 20 kilos, and I was struggling to walk upstairs. I was struggling to do basic walking. It wasn't even a case of trying to run. It was a case of just going from point A to point B, like going upstairs. I like vividly remember I went to gym to climb those stairs at the gym. That was a struggle. That was a serious struggle for me to get up those stairs because I was so heavy. I was so unfit. And so every time I went to the gym, it was like a reminder that yes, I'm super strong and I'm lifting heavy weights, but there's something wrong here that I can't even walk up these stairs. And it concerned me, but it didn't concern me to the point yet that I had to do something about it. And we got engaged, and we were away for the engagement, and we had the whole family there. It was out in Tulbach. We did a park run on the Saturday, and like basically I have an uncle and I have cousins, and even my parents who are not fit, but they regularly walk. And my wife was obviously also, she was fit. She was able to do these types of things. And my brothers, like they were big into their fitness. So we got to this park run, and I vividly remember the feeling of the struggle to walk that park run. My parents walk it. And I remember like even trying to keep up with my dad walking slowly, and how much of a struggle and how much it took out of me just to be able to walk those 5Ks. And it wasn't like there weren't hills. It wasn't like a lot of vert. It was just a simple 5K walk. And I just struggled. I managed to do it, but it was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. And I think that was the moment there was a shift in my brain where I was like, this can't be what health and fitness is. This can't be the definition of fitness, where I'm able to lift really heavy weights twice a week, but I can't even walk 5Ks. Maybe it's not a case of, okay, now I need to become a runner, but maybe it's a case of I need to find a way to bring a balance into my life. But this whole thing was only an idea. As soon as I got back into the gym on the Monday, it was like, okay, I'm back here. And the idea of having to give up, say, 45% or 50% of that to do something like running or walking, which I didn't enjoy. I didn't have any connection to it. I didn't see it as fun. It didn't look very fun, especially compared to the weights and the fun that I was having in the gym. I think also at that stage, running as a sport, it wasn't what it is today. It was a very different time. And running just didn't seem like something people did or young people did. It didn't seem like giving up 50% of the fun and the fitness I was having would be worth it, even though I was definitely struggling with the fact that I wasn't able to walk or run. And got to December of that year and we went away. And when we went away, it was those moments that I had more clarity to appreciate the kind of running side, because I was away from the gym. I was unable to be in the gym. So I was able to then focus a little bit more on the running. And I had these kind of like brief moments of maybe this could be something that I enjoy, but it's definitely something that like for my health, it's probably a good idea. And I would say I made a conscious decision the beginning of 2020 to give it a try. To obviously, as I was saying, I'm not going to give up the gym, but to at least try and bring a bit of balance into my life and do a little bit of running and try and lose the weight and get rid of this feeling of not being able to walk 5Ks, of not being able to go up the stairs. And the universe works in extremely funny ways. And this has always been the turning point, is that 3 months later, or 3 months into it, COVID hits. And with COVID, it was like gyms are closed. You can't go to gym. So the one fitness activity that I really loved was suddenly taken away from me. And obviously we switched to online workouts, and that was immediately no. The idea of, for me, the fitness in the gym, it was really that social aspect. It was going to that gym. It was being around those people. It was being with my trainer, pushing myself in that kind of environment. And the idea of doing this by myself in a flat, even though my coach was on Zoom there with me, without the equipment, without the vibe, without any of that. And I was like, this is not what I signed up for. And I was like, okay, I've been wanting to try this kind of like running thing. And it's like the one activity that A, allows me to get out of the house, but B, it's good for me. And that's where the journey started. If everyone remembers back to COVID, we got those times where we were allowed out. And it was just very much like chilled runs on the promenade, finding my feet in the sport, seeing if I enjoy it. And something clicked. I don't know if it was, I guess, the help of COVID and not having anything else on, like really allowed me to focus. But something clicked that I really suddenly found that not only was this incredibly freeing and an opportunity to just be out there and just enjoy being outside and moving my body, but it was also something, once again, where I could push myself, I could monitor my improvement, and I could get better at it. And it was something that I could run every single day and slowly get better. And the idea of being in one place and not being able to walk 5Ks, to running 5Ks, to running 10Ks, that idea slowly started creeping in. And the idea of there's this concept of self-improvement. And if I just keep at this thing, I'm going to get better and I'm going to get into a position where it becomes more enjoyable. It becomes something I love, something I look forward to. And I stuck at it. Every opportunity during COVID we got, I was out there. It was extremely difficult. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have proper shoes. I didn't have a watch. I had some old gym clothes, or at least my clothes that I was using in the gym. And I just got out there and I just did it. And it didn't, I think one of the amazing things about COVID, and as I've mentioned, that kind of space, was that there wasn't a lot of pressure at that time, because there weren't races, there weren't run clubs happening, there weren't, like, obviously people were on social media, like running around their house and stuff, but there wasn't this kind of FOMO of missing out, or like this, oh, someone's running a marathon, I need to be running a marathon. So I was able to develop my running in a sort of vacuum and in a very sort of closed space where I wasn't comparing myself to anyone. I didn't know and I wasn't able to see what other people were doing. There weren't races to train for. So it was very much a kind of mission by myself. And I think also during COVID, it gave me that time to get out of my apartment and really just clear my thoughts. And I think that kind of connection between the running and that allowing me to that space really, it really latched on pretty quickly. We went from the promenade and then I started running in the parking lot of our flat, and I would just do loops around the parking lot. And again, it was by myself with music or podcasts, just listening to stuff by myself on my own, just getting better and better every single day. Eventually, I got banned from running in the parking lot, COVID was, and then I moved into running in my apartment. I actually moved into running in the stairwell, but then got banned from doing that too, and then moved to running in my apartment. But it was, the bug had bitten, and I was like, okay, I don't know how long COVID's going to last, so I don't know when I'm going to go back into gym, so I might as well enjoy this, and I really enjoyed it. At that stage, my concept of running was that in order to get better at running, you had to run, and you had to run consistently, and every time you had to try and get better. So what I would do is that I would try and improve every single time I ran. I would try and increase my distance or try and run a little bit harder or get better. And I was very focused, even though it was very individual, I was very focused on bettering myself. But the idea for me of bettering myself was to run every single day and just make those kind of small improvements. I didn't have any goals at that stage. There weren't races I'd entered or anything. It was just the little bit I knew about running was the key to getting better. Consistency, running every day, and I was enjoying it. So it was, okay, if I can run every day, no problem. I'm getting better at it. I'm loving it. And for the rest of the year, that was my attitude. And I think, as I've mentioned, when I find something that I'm passionate about, I dive headfirst into it. So I was running, and I was running a lot. And I was running almost every day, and obviously didn't understand the concept of rest days or fatigue or periodization or any of that. And I remember it got to January of the next year, and I got to a point where I was like, this running thing, I love it. I love the feeling. I love improving. I love being outside, but my body is done. Like, my body was completely fatigued. I'd pretty much hadn't probably missed a day of running since I'd started in March. And I had to learn through that suffering or that kind of those mistakes that this is not like how you get better at running. This is not the way you improve. And I got to a crossroads where I was like, how much do I love running? Is it something that I am passionate about? And do I want to continue with it? Or, has this fatigue and the suffering, is it enough and I'm done with it?
Trail running beats up everything, your legs, your lungs, and especially your feet. The last thing you need is socks that give up before you do. That's why I'm thrilled to announce that this season of Trail Chasers is sponsored by Gilnockie Socks. These aren't just your run-of-the-mill socks. Gilnockie socks are made for people who demand more. More performance, more durability, and more comfort. They're designed to prevent blisters with premium moisture-wicking materials that keep your feet dry no matter how long or muddy the trail gets. Plus, they're treated with HydroCool and Silver Plus, so they stay fresh, breathable, and ready for your next adventure. Since I started using Gilnockie socks, I haven't had to stop mid-run to adjust or worry about discomfort. They just keep working mile after mile, run after run. So why settle for socks that don't keep up? Visit gilnockie.com and use the code TRAILCHASERS at checkout for 20% off your first order. Trust me, once you try them, you won't go back. Your feet will thank you.
And I realized that I'd found a passion in it. I'd been drawn to it. Not only the idea of the self-improvement, but just something which for the first time I could own and I could actually decide whether I'm going to enjoy it or whether I'm going to be good at it. Because for my whole life, I found myself in places where I'd just fallen into things because they were available. I'd never really found something that I actually enjoyed, I was actually passionate about, and I could actually own it myself and say, this is what I love doing, this is how I get better, and then track that progress. So for the first time, I had something like that really had all of those ingredients, and I was able to say, this is the thing I do. I'm a runner. And I think for the first time, that was like a big shift for me, where I was like, wait, like there are things in my life there are things that I'm passionate about and I can do and I can get better at. And I think for a long time, I was like, I'm just going to be, I guess, drifting along from one job to the next, not really enjoying anything I'm doing. So that's what running gave me, apart from the mental health benefits, apart from the being outside. And obviously also I was losing the weight. I was feeling good. I was looking good. And I also suddenly realized that dieting was only a component of the fitness journey. And the running was really helping get off that weight and really helping me diet and get back to a better looking body. And I no longer had that feeling of not being able to walk upstairs. I was able to run a park run. I was able to join my family on those types of things. And for the first time, that also felt really good, because I think with the fitness and the gym, even though there were a lot of people around, it's a very insular thing. And it's a thing that not a lot of people get. So I think for me, it was like, if you tell someone you bench press 100 kilos, they're like, that sounds impressive. But if you tell someone you've run a marathon, most people understand that's a massive feat. So I think that also, for the first time, was like, people actually get this. There are other people that do this, and there's a community around it. And essentially what happened was, I decided, if I'm going to continue on this journey, I need to get myself a coach. I need to find someone that will take me from where I am now to wherever I want to go. I didn't know at that stage, but also teach me how to do it properly so that I wouldn't have this fatigue. I wouldn't have these injuries that I was experiencing, because I was literally going from 0 to 100 in quite a short space of time. And I got a coach. And he was incredible. He taught me how to run. He took me through the training. He took me through the exercises. He showed me like how it all worked, how I improved. And we started working on goals. We started working on plans. And I ran my first half marathon. Races hadn't properly come back at that stage. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to set myself a goal, 6 months to get to a half marathon. And I'm going to run it by myself. My brother joined me, and we were away on the weekend in Paarl, and we decided, okay, we're going to do this. We mapped out a route, and we did a half marathon, and it was so amazing that my whole family was there and all my friends were there, and they were being the support crew and the aid stations and tracking us and following us. And when I finished that, it was the most incredible sense of accomplishment. That feeling of not only that within kind of a year and a bit space, I'd gone from not being able to walk 5Ks to running a half marathon, but also the fact that this was something that I could get better at and just get better at and get better at. And that feeling of not only achieving that, but that feeling that I got while running that half marathon was unlike anything I'd ever experienced in my life. There was obviously the pain, and it was extremely hard, but the feeling that I got while I was doing it, and the fact, that feeling of pushing your body to the limit and past the limit in order to achieve something, that was what kind of hooked me. And I think for me, it became a process of, how do I get better? How do I push myself to the limit? And for the next kind of year and a bit, that's exactly what I did. And once again, I found myself in that space where the cumulative fatigue was just way too much. I was getting injured all the time. I found that the road running was just so hard on my body and so taxing mentally, physically. And again, like every single year, for the next 2 years, I would get to the end of the year and I would be completely shattered. I would be completely broken. It had just been too much, too soon, and I was quickly falling out of love with the sport. And I found that once I started doing races and there was that comparison that came in, that suddenly I was at the back. No longer I was comparing myself, who couldn't run 5Ks a year ago. I was now comparing myself to this massive field of people, and I was right at the back, and they were all loving life, enjoying it, having the most amazing time, and running really quickly. And I was struggling through these events. And I worked my way up to a marathon. That was obviously the goal. And I spent like the better part, I would say, of a year and a half trying to work up to this marathon. And the idea was that at the end of the year, this was the end of 2022, I would run the Winelands Marathon. And I got to that marathon and I was completely underprepared. I potentially could have done the distance, but I was completely unprepared in terms of heat training, in terms of nutrition. I still remember, like, I didn't really know what nutrition to use. So I asked a friend what they use, and they said they'll lend me some of their nutrition. So they gave me some of their nutrition. First time I'd ever used it in a race. I'd never really run in those kind of temperatures. If anyone's done the Winelands Marathon before, you will know that it's extremely hot and extremely brutal. And that caught me by surprise. And then I also had no clue how to pace a marathon. And if you've done the Winelands Marathon, you'll know that the first 20 odd Ks are all downhill. So it was extremely hot. Stellenbosch in December. It was downhill. I hadn't used this nutrition before, and it was a recipe for disaster. I started way too hard. I filled my bottles only with the nutrition that I'd never used before. That quickly got hot. It was disgusting. I couldn't drink it, stopped drinking, took in a little bit of water at the aid stations, but got to 20 odd 25 Ks and I was done. I was cramping, I was dizzy, I was nauseous, dehydrated. And at that stage, I didn't really know these symptoms and these signs. All I knew was I was feeling like death, and there was no way that I could push through this marathon. It was done. My day was done. There was no concept of let's just sit down, regroup, and carry on. So I sat on the side of the road, phoned my wife, said, come fetch me, I'm done. 27 Ks, that was my marathon. And it was a week before my birthday. And the goal was obviously to complete the marathon by my birthday. And that like broke me. It was so disheartening that I'd been training for so long and I just couldn't get it done. And I think that was like the first kind of nail in the coffin of just developing this really bad relationship with road running. The next nail, I guess, was deciding I'm not going to let this stop me. I'm going to run a marathon anyway, 4 or 5 days later by myself on the promenade so I could get it done before my birthday. So I enlisted the help of some friends and I basically just ran loops on the promenade. The weather was terrible actually on that day, and it wasn't very fun. It was just a matter of getting it done, ticking that box, and it was brutal. It didn't have much like joy or happiness, and it was just the sole driver to get to that marathon distance and say I've done a marathon before my birthday, and finished that marathon, and I was completely done. I think I did 5 hours or something. And and obviously that was the end of the year. I was done. I'd fatigued my body to a point where this was no longer a fun thing. I was getting injured all the time. I actually after my birthday, ran through December without like properly taking a rest. So got to January and I was properly buggered. And I was like, again, in that space of, I can't keep doing this. I can't keep pushing my body to this place where it can no longer cope. And I developed such a bad relationship with road running, and it was just like, I'm done with road running. All these injuries, all this fatigue, all this like just running constantly on the road. But I still had this like burning desire for running. I still was extremely passionate about running, and I really wanted to be involved, and I still wanted to do it. And I guess I was fortunate in that both my first coach and my second coach were both trail runners. And trail running, it wasn't a thing you did. It seemed very extreme, very dangerous. Like the idea of going up into the mountains and running, not having proper nutrition or not having a way to get rescued, and obviously the rocks and the running on the rocks, and that whole thing seemed extremely dangerous and extremely daunting. Like there was no sort of beginner trail groups. There was none of that to get me started. So for me, all I was seeing at that stage were my coach, and now these people that I knew that he was coaching, who were doing these crazy trail runs of these massive distances. And I just couldn't compute the gap between where I was and where they were, and how to narrow that gap. So for me, again, it was like, I can't wrap my head around the fact that trail running could be something I enjoy or want to do, because I knew nothing about it. And there were just all these misconceptions and all these ideas in my head around it. And I think it took me to get to that point where I was like, if I want to stay involved in running and in the sport, I needed to find something else other than road running. And I was like, okay, let's give this trail running thing a go. Let's not commit to anything. Let's find some easy trails. I remember for a long time, my idea of trail running was Lions Loop. That's what I would do. I consistently did the Lions Loop. I was still, that's like very much for almost a year, I was like, I don't want to go on, like, the mountains, very scary. I don't want to be up in the mountains. And I convinced myself that I could do trail running and be a trail runner by just running on Lions Loop and like on the green belt and these like contour paths. And I built that story up in my head. That was my version of trail running. That was where my comfort zone was. And that's where I was going to stay. And I very quickly fell in love with trail running. I think for me, it's everything that I've mentioned that I was struggling with the road running. Suddenly was like, hey, there's another part of running which doesn't have those bad memories or those bad, the things that you were struggling with before. I was able to, the back of the pack, it wasn't as bad in a trail run. You could walk, you could enjoy yourself, you're outdoors. There wasn't that must finish quickly element of trail running. And I really enjoyed just the non-competitive nature of it, the feeling of being outside, the feeling of, once again, I'm on this personal journey. I'm alone, even when you run with people, you run in a race, you're very much alone, you're very much on your own mission. So once again, I found that I was able to be in my own space and be in a space where I could constantly better myself while still getting involved with the community and while still running with people. And I also felt for the first time that it wasn't a bad place to be slow. There wasn't this overemphasis on speed and quick times. So I felt much more accepted in that space than I'd ever felt in the road space. And I also felt, for me, as I've mentioned, the idea of being at a point and challenging yourself and bettering yourself to get to the next point, that suddenly seemed in trail running that there was such a big gap and so much to learn and so much to take in that it was exciting and daunting, but it also gave me a clear plan for the things that I had to learn in order to improve. And I just fell in love with the sport. I fell in love with every single aspect of it, with the self-development, with the community, with the ability to change people's lives and the lives that I'd seen changed through the sport, the way that it allows beginners to get into the sport a lot easier than road running, the accepting nature of it, the social nature of it. There was just something about it that really resonated with me, this idea of community, this idea of, again, as I've mentioned, this is something that's mine, this is something I enjoy, but at the same time, there's a whole community of people that enjoy it and love it and are passionate about it. I think that was the other thing, was there's a community of people that are on the kind of same mission that you are, to better themselves, to enjoy being out in nature, and to constantly strive for improvement in the space. And there's that camaraderie that was shared. And I quickly found that there were so many layers to trail running and so much to learn that fascinated me. And as someone who wanted to learn and always wants to improve, the multi kind of layer of trail running, that you could do a 5K on a wine farm and you could do a 5K on Table Mountain, and they're so completely different, and there's so many different skills that are needed to learn to, do them differently. There's so much option. You don't have to. I found it extremely limiting in the road space, where it was basically like 5K, 10K, 21K marathon. Once you'd completed that, it was the only way to then improve was to either go comrades or to get faster. And I didn't have the ability. I didn't feel that fast was my strength. I really struggled to run fast. So for that, it was not appealing. But suddenly now there was a space where I could do a 5 to 10K for a year and just do different types of 5Ks and work on different types of skills and work on my nutrition and work on my strength and work on like my navigation skills. And that alone was enough to draw me in. But adding the layer of just the fact that you get to go out into nature and you get to be alone, even if you're with people, you get to experience some of the most beautiful places on earth. And you get to do that all while bettering yourself, while actually doing something healthy, doing something for yourself that's improving your life. And then I discovered the nature of the community and how incredible this kind of shared feeling, and I often call it shared suffering. And I suddenly found that you would go to a trail race and people would be waiting for you to finish, even though you were 2-3 hours after them. They were waiting for you. There was a vibe. And suddenly you realize, wait, we have a lot in common. And these are my people. You suddenly have that feeling of being accepted, you can be new to the sport and it doesn't matter. There's no barriers when it comes to trail running. The only barriers that were up were the preconceived barriers that I had in my mind, that it was dangerous, that it was scary, that there were all these things that prevented me from doing it. And I think that kind of gets me to a point of the things that trail running has given me, the confidence, the self-development, the kind of belief in my ability to push further, the ability to move me out of my comfort zone, that the ability to see myself improving, plus the benefit of being outdoors, plus the benefit of meeting some of the most incredible, amazing people, all of that it had given to me, I was like, there must be a way for me to give that back and to bring people into that sport and get people to experience the incredible feeling and the incredible experience that I had coming into the sport. And I thought, what stopped me in the beginning? For a long time, I resisted moving into trail running. And what were those kind of barriers? And for me, it was always like that first kind of leap, like that kind of taking the first step into trail running. That was like always the kind of just the thought of it seemed so daunting and so big. You needed shoes, you needed to have like water, you needed to carry water on you, you needed to map out your routes, you needed to like safety, all of that information overload. And as I've mentioned, I found that with trail running, it was like you started here, you needed to go there. That gap was so much bigger than something like road running. And I thought there must be a way for us to bridge that gap, to bring people into the sport, because I guarantee you that once they've bridged that gap, they won't look back. Very rarely do people get into trail running and they're like, this is not something I can do. And 9 times out of 10, when someone says trail running is not for me, they haven't taken that step to bridge that gap. And it's, as I've said, it's extremely daunting. And for a year, I was simultaneously in the space of, I need to be doing something better with my life. I need to be doing something different. I'm no longer able to work in the social media space where I'm not passionate about it and it's something I'm just doing, and there has to be something else. So these two kind of ideas were floating along at the same time in my brain. The idea of moving out of social media, the idea that podcasting could be something that I wanted to get into, but at the same time, the idea of bringing other people into this incredible community and helping people bridge that gap that existed that I had to overcome. But once I'd overcome it, it changed my life completely. And I think for me, a lot of times I have thought about doing things, but I've never actually taken the action because, again, like it seems big, it seems daunting. Like I've never done podcasting. As with the trail running, it seemed like there was this whole other world that I was starting from scratch. I didn't know anything about editing, recording, all of that. And it seemed so daunting, and there seemed to be such a big gap that I was like, there's no way I could actually do this. But for the first time, I was just drawn to it. The thing that clicked was I had the topic, I had what I wanted to speak about, I had something that I was passionate about that resonated with me, where I was like, you know what, it's going to be hard, it's going to be difficult to start a podcast, but the passion and my aim of getting people into the sport, like that would drive me through the difficult times and drive me through like the hills and the walls that I would hit while learning about this podcasting. And I just decided, let's do it. I came up with a name. I got a designer to come up with a logo that really encapsulated everything I wanted to speak about. The name, The Trail Chasers, for me, it's really about chasing not only trails, but just chasing that feeling and chasing that experience, chasing that we're always chasing being better. We're always chasing new trails. We're always chasing new experiences. We're always chasing new races. And this constant striving to be better and to improve, and obviously to immerse yourself fully in this world. And so I came up with the name. For me, I wanted people to look at the logo and be like, I get it. I get what's happening here. The logo very much speaks to bringing people from outside and onto the path and then onto the mountain, and bringing people into that element of chasing the trail, and getting people to say, wow, chasing trails seems really interesting and really enjoyable, and it looks amazing. How do I get into that space? And that's how it started. I managed to get a sponsor, luckily through my work with social media. They covered the costs for my studio, for the studio time, and I just hit play. And the response from people who I considered potential guests, but also the response from the audience, has been absolutely incredible. And I think for me, I'm now at a stage where we're going back to why I started this podcast. Yes, we've done some incredible episodes. We've had some incredible talks. But for me, we're at a stage now where we're going back to the beginning. We're reformulating this. We're going back to why did we start this podcast? And as I've said, the reason why I started this podcast was to get people into trail running, to get people to fall in love with the sport as I have, to discover the passion as I have. And how do we do that? We need to do that through inspiration, and we need to do that through education, because you can't have one without the other. You need people to be inspired. You need people to hear how amazing the space is and what can be achieved. But at the same time, you need to teach people basic skills that will allow them to bridge that gap between having no clue about trail running and being able to run 30 Ks in the mountains or on a wine farm, as I've done. And so that's, for me, is 2025 is where we're going. We're going to reformulate the podcast. We're going to take it back to the basics, and we're going to really create an incredible podcast that teaches people about how to get into trail running, about the educational side, but also the fun side of trail running, of inspiring people, but also educating people, of being able to say to someone, if you don't know how to get into trail running, listen to this podcast. These are the practical steps you need to take. And these are the steps that you need to take to get to a level where you can try it, or this is how you can ease yourself into the sport and not make the mistakes that I made or other people have made. So that's where we are. That's where we're going. And I'm really excited, because I think after a year of kind of development and playing around in the space and having these amazing interviews, I'm really now in a place where the vision is clear, the idea is clear. We are really going to be a podcast that people can use as a resource, that people can turn to when they want to get better, and a space to support people in that kind of development, in that growth, in that journey, in that chasing trails. So that's where we are. I'm excited. I can't wait to get stuck in and for you guys to join me on this. And looking forward to it. It's going to be an incredible year. I've got some amazing ideas, things lined up, but I'm really just excited to grow this podcast, to grow this community. I think for me, the ultimate aim is to look back in 5 years and say, I've brought 500 people into the sport. There are 500 people that are doing trail running as a hobby, as a profession, as a lifestyle because of my podcast. That is the aim, and that is the goal, and that's where we're going. That was my first solo podcast. I really loved telling my story and talking to you. If you love this, if you are excited to get into trail running, or you don't really know, subscribe, get involved. We're on all of the casting platforms, Spotify, Apple. We have an incredible library of interviews that we have done, an incredible lineup of incredible interviews to come. Also, please get in touch with me on social media. Send me a message, send me an email, get in touch with me. Tell me what you love about trail running. Tell me what you're struggling with trail running, and let's start a conversation. Let's start talking about the things that we're struggling with, and let's grow and build and educate each other.